Brahmarishi Vashishta and Brahmarishi Vishwamitra, they worship Lord Ram. According to them, Lord Ram is like a bridge. And he's a bridge that helps you cross from this world to the other world, from the material world to the spiritual world.
जय धारी माँ। हरे कृष्णा शुभा जी।
नमस्ते।
जय धारी माँ जी। हमारी ऑडियंसेस का स्वागत है। आइए जुड़िए। जय सिया राम। आज का जो हमारा चैप्टर है वो है अ सैड मोनार्क इन अ हैप्पी किंगडम। उनके सैडनेस के कारण कुछ अलग थे, आज उस पर चर्चा करेंगे। अ वेरी राइटियस किंग। इस चैप्टर की एसेंस है लव इज ऑल अबाउट focus. Being focused is a sign of love. Shubhaji, this chapter is actually in two parts. One is about King Dashratha, Ayodhya, how Ayodhya was unconquerable and it was safe from internal and external enemies. How he built that kingdom and all that he surrounded himself with. So the big M, his council of ministers. But please tell us how it was so safe from internal and external enemies, Shubhaji.
There are two types of enemies for a king. The external enemies are those who belong to other kingdoms, who probably are envious, who are looking at conquering one's kingdom. So that's an external enemy. But the internal enemy of a king is the six anarthas: uh, anger, pride, envy, um, um, illusion. So many of these are very internal in nature, and they are also considered to be enemies because they create a state of disturbance in the mind. And when there is internal disturbance, that internal disturbance leads to great external disturbance also. So the great teachers explain that before a king sets out to conquer the external enemies, he needs to conquer the internal enemies, and that is why no conquest is complete when until there is alignment at both the external and the internal level.
Very good.
Ji Shubhaji. It was also a kingdom that was extremely self-sufficient. Now, what does it mean for a kingdom to be self-sufficient?
So the description of the kingdom of Ayodhya is fascinating in the Ramayana. It talks about Ayodhya being the capital of the Koshal kingdom, and the city of Ayodhya was 120 miles long and 30 miles wide. And the word Ayodhya, as it says, is Yuddha means war, and Ayuddha means a place where there is no war. Ayodhya represents the human mind, and Dasharath represents um, the person who has conquered his 10 senses. Dasha Ratha. Ratha means chariot, but in the Upanishads, the body is compared to a chariot. And just like the body has 10 senses: knowledge acquiring and perceptive senses. So these 10 senses that a human being have, they have to be controlled, and that person who can control the 10 senses is called Dasharath. So Dasharath stays in Ayodhya, and Ayodhya represents a peaceful mind. A mind that is peaceful and a body that has your 10 senses under control, such a person can give birth to Ram in his life. So the qualification to give birth to God in your life is that your 10 senses should be controlled and your mind should be peaceful. Only then you are qualified to give birth to God in your life. So Ayodhya was a very safe place because it had systems that were so perfect. The walls of Ayodhya had weapons in them, which could attack an insect which is as small as a mosquito, or it could destroy a bird that is as big as Garuda. So, and not only that, Ayodhya, the security system of Ayodhya is designed in such a way that it could not only detect enemies from coming in, it could also detect people with evil intentions coming in. That is the kind of systems that were there in Ayodhya. Um, Ayodhya was like a very opulent place, and the palaces of Ayodhya were more white than the moon. And the king of Ayodhya sponsored music all over Ayodhya. In different parts of Ayodhya, organized by the government, by the king, there would be musicians stationed playing music. Now imagine a place where if you are exhausted and tired, and you're just walking by that lane and there's music going on. It's sponsored by the king. So the idea of music is a balm that calms agitated minds and it inspires innovation. So ideally, if anyone wants to really be very creative in nature, there should be some music associated with one's life. It inspires creativity and it inspires calmness. And it is explained Dasharath overcame the ocean of beggars by giving charity. He crossed the ocean of knowledge by plunging deep into the scriptures. He crossed the ocean of enemies by his sword. And he crossed the ocean of vices by immersing himself in spiritual practices. So that means if a leader wants to conquer the vices, the internal enemies, the leader has to spend some time, immerse himself in spiritual practices on a daily basis. So essentially, Ayodhya became great because Dasharath invested in four parts of his life. The first part is a physical part. So that means, see, Ayodhya is like a human being only, right? The city is compared to a human being, and just like a human being has these four portions: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. The city of Ayodhya also has these four portions, and the king has these four portions basically. So the physical quotient of Ayodhya is represented by the army, which is powerful physically. The intellectual quotient of Ayodhya is in two things. One is studying scriptures, and second is having a wise counsel. So Dasharath Maharaj invested time in studying the scriptures and invested time in gathering together a set of very wise people who were called his ministers and his advisors. The third thing that Dasharath did was he had an emotional growth. How did the emotional aspect of emotional quotient be developed? First, by being kind. Second, by being generous. Third, by being sensitive towards weak people. These three ways are ways in which you develop your emotional quotient. And finally, Dasharath developed a spiritual quotient by taking some time off from his worldly pursuits and pursue the goal of one's life and take refuge in higher powers. So, this way, Ayodhya became a place that was complete in all aspects, wealthy, but also satisfied and happy.
Ji, Shubhaji,
Shubhaji, Shubhaji, you talked about 10 senses. What are the 10? Dashrath meant thus. Dashrath means thus,
Yeah.
right? What are the 10 senses you talked about?
So, there
We know
are
5 senses. Which are the other
five.
5?
This is called Gyanendriyas and Karmendriyas. Gyanendriyas are knowledge acquiring senses, and Karmendriyas are acting senses. So that the Gyanendriyas are the two eyes, the two ears, the nostril, the mouth, um, the hands, the sense of touch, basically. So these are so basically anything where you gain information that's called knowledge acquiring senses, perception, basically. And karmendriyas are acting senses: the two hands, the two legs, the ears, the genitals, the anus, like that. These are called karmendriyas that are acting senses, basically. That's what the 10 senses are.
Very interesting. This is the first time I'm hearing. I mean, we only talk of Panch Indriyas, but your other five Indriyas I didn't know. Their legs, their hands, and the other organs which
Yeah,
do
yeah,
the karma.
correct.
Karma.
Do
Wow.
actions.
To do
Kriya.
action.
Yes,
Wow.
karma, kriya. Three.
Fantastic.
Shubhaji, we will focus on talking about Lord Dashratha's big M, his 8 ministers.
Yeah.
What I want to know also, Shubhaji, is he was seeking for the right kind of atmosphere around him. He was looking for a council, he wanted a council that would truly be well meaning for him. They were his true well wishers. So please let's talk about that because it's so important to even sense who is our well wisher and who is not. So I think King Dashratha wanted well meaning people around him. And that's how the big M, and they played a very, very important role in Ramayana. Ji.
So Dasharath had a very interesting type of model, which I call as Dasharath's leadership model. So Dasharath's leadership model was a combination of intellectual people and at the same time very astute administrative people. So Ayodhya's intellectual powers consisted of Brahmanas. They had there are some descriptions of the quality of these people that constituted the leadership model of Dasharath. So anyone he picked up to be among those leaders, they had some very distinct qualities that he sought in them. And when I'm going to list out these distinct qualities, it's just so amazing and apt. Unfortunately, we find them so much missing today, right? And that is why it is very important to go back and understand what is the missing link, basically. So Dasharath talks about people who have control over their senses. These are people who follow strict spiritual discipline. The most amazing thing is that what they ask others to do, they did it themselves. So it's like, today you have people who give big ideas that others should follow, but they have another set of ideas for themselves. It's like an elephant who has one tusk to show the world and another set of teeth that he doesn't show the world, basically. So the ministers of Dasharath Maharaj, they were very strict with themselves and accommodated others' shortcomings. The Brahmanas, the intellectual people of Dasharath Maharaj's kingdom, they did not beg for survival. They only accepted donations from grateful students. And before taking donations, this is very important. Before taking donations, they verified if the money was earned by rightful means. Only then they took donations. Imagine if NGOs today had to do that. I don't think any NGO would be running at all. Um, and then the Brahmanas, these people commanded respect because they lived such pure lives. Dasharath Maharaj, in addition to the intellectuals, so he had a combination. As I said, he had a combination of intellectual people, Brahmanas, and he had a combination of powerful administrators on the council of Ayodhya's leadership. So Dasharath had 8 ministers, who were considered to be the most powerful and most important people of Ayodhya. So he realized that for a leader to be successful, the first thing he should not be is not be autocratic. And for Dasharath not to be autocratic, he needs to have a set of people who are as competent as him, if not better. And these are people who were so the people that were chosen were so wisely chosen. Each one of them was expert in one thing. And in that aspect, Dasharath completely had faith in them because they were the experts in that particular aspect. And that's how Dasharath created a set of people that were so powerful. And the interesting part of these ministers, the eight ministers that we're going to be talking about, is that the name of the minister is also the work they do. In the previous times when names would be chosen, there would be a lot of research gone into choosing a particular name for a person, and a lot of that research would be based on astrological consultations, based on consulting wise people who were expert in understanding and foretelling the future. And the name that would be chosen would be so apt to the person's quality and to the person's talent and abilities that it would be a perfect match, basically. So here are the names of the ministers of Ayodhya. The first minister, he was named as Drishti, and his role was vision. He was a very far-sighted person, and he was the architect of Ayodhya's fortune. He gave, just like his name says, he gave Drishti to the country. The second minister, his name was Vijaya. Vijaya led the army to victory. The role of Vijaya was to expand the kingdom. Um, the third minister was named as Jayanti. There are a lot of people who keep conquering kingdom after kingdom, but as they go ahead, what they have conquered behind it disappears. And somebody else comes and takes over. So the role of Vijay was to go ahead and expand, but the role of Jayanta was to ensure that whatever was conquered remains with the kingdom. And he established proper jurisdiction and proper control over what is there. Um, the third minister, his name was Surashtra. He was also called as Artha Sadhaka. This person's role was to keep the royal treasury full by collecting taxes from the citizens. But the way taxes were collected were very interesting. So, I mean, everybody in India knows what tax systems are, isn't it? And people are still wondering what certain taxes are meant for and what they are actually, understanding it is. So, Artha Sadhaka, the way their Ayodhya's tax system would be, was like a honeybee collecting nectar from flowers. It's a very interesting example that is given in the Vidura Niti of the Mahabharata, where Vidura says a good leader should be like a honeybee that takes nectar from a flower. So if you've seen a honeybee, it takes a little nectar from one flower, then it goes to the next flower and takes a little nectar from the second flower. It goes to a third flower, takes a little nectar from the third flower. You will never find a honeybee sucking so much nectar from one flower that the flower dies. Never. The honeybee is sensitive to the flower. Human beings are like flowers. It is important that we be sensitive to them. Taking taxes from them is good, but not at the point of destroying the flower itself, isn't it? So this is the way in which tax collection would happen. So the next minister, his name was Siddhartha. His role was resource management. His role was to fulfill the needs of the king and the citizens. And it is very important that you understand which need to be fulfilled and which need should not be fulfilled. There's a big difference between needs and wants. So Siddhartha never fulfilled everybody's wants. He focused on people's needs, basically. And the needs were fulfilled compulsively and wants were fulfilled selectively, both for the king and the citizens. There are so many people who are so powerful and and almost kingly. But because of this, a certain wants being too much, you study the history of people, somebody like even Osho, he had 99 Rolls Royce cars, and he was pushing his people to get him the 100th one. And when he pushed for the 100th one, that's what broke the community. So till 99 Rolls Royce, somehow they were helping him, with it. But when he pushed heavily for the 100th one, that broke the community basically. So how a leader's needs, not just the citizens, but even the king's needs have to be fulfilled selectively. Sorry, needs have to be fulfilled compulsively, and wants have to be fulfilled selectively, basically. So Siddhartha was doing that role. The next minister is very interesting. I don't think any country in the world today has a ministry like this. This minister was called as a Kopa. This minister, an entire department was to ensure that no citizen was disgruntled. Word kopa means sad or sulking. The word kopa means a place, a kingdom where no one is sulking. So imagine department created to ensure that everybody is heard. So essentially, the need to be heard is so powerful in human beings. People don't want solutions to problems. They want somebody to understand their problems. If people feel heard, they actually feel the problem is solved. Not all problems can be solved. Most problems in life have to be tolerated. A lot of problems have to be neglected. Very few problems have to be can be solved. But when citizens, when people feel that at least my problem has been heard, that itself actually gives a person so much of reassurance. It gives so much confidence in the leadership, basically. At least somebody is hearing my problem. They may not solve my problem, but a department is created who will come and sit with me and hear my problem first. That's what a Kopa's role was. And there was another minister whose name was Dharmapal, and he was a policymaker, guided the country according to Dharma. So anytime there was a dilemma which was dharmic in nature, Dharmapal was the one who was consulted. And then finally, among all of them, was the oldest among them. His name was Sumantra, who was the prime minister of the cabinet. He was the oldest, he was the wisest, he was the most trusted person of Dasharath Maharaj. He was simple, but his words were considered to be absolute truths. And the most amazing thing about Sumantra was he was the chariot driver of Dasharath Maharaj also. So we have heard of Chaiwala becoming prime minister, but here is a chariot driver who became a prime minister, but he continued being a chariot driver also. So even though Sumantra was the prime minister of the country, he still drove Dasharath's chariot. This is something that you will not find anywhere in the world. What kind of humility it requires for a prime minister to, after the court is over, go and drive a chariot of the king? And Sumatra managed both the roles perfectly. When he was a driver, he didn't give advice, and when he was a minister, he didn't act stupid. You know, both the places he was very, very conscious of the role that he was playing. And the most amazing thing about Sumantra was Sumantra didn't give advice unless asked for. He knew everything, but he wouldn't intervene because he knew that knowledge, unless it is sought, it is not valued. So this was Sumantra, who was the prime minister, and above all these 8 people were 2 people who were the Brahmanas, the intellectual people, but these are people who were saints. Vashishta and Vamadev. These 2 were Brahmanas, they were gurus of Ayodhya, and they were very highly respected by everyone in Ayodhya because of the conduct, because of the knowledge they possessed, because of the austerity and disciplined life they lived. And these 2 were almost, like the last say, So Vashishta, if the 8 ministers would consult and speak something and offer advice to the king, and finally the king will ask these 2 for their final consent, and that's when things would go ahead. So this is the kind of system that Dasharath had to manage his kingdom.
Where is all this recorded, Shubhaji?
Very much in the
Where is it, in Ramayan or where?
Valmiki Ramayan, very much in the Valmiki Ramayan.
Achha. Where in the narration itself it talks about all these
There are verses. Yeah, the verses talk about
verses, from the verses. Wow, fantastic! What a culling! You've done so much of extraction from the verses.
Yeah.
Fantastic! How ancient! What an amazing administrative governance we had back from the very ancient times.
Absolutely. The model of Dasharath Maharaj is something that was a very commonly followed model in many countries in the world, where there's a combination of intellectual people and administrative people working together, because that combination is what is deadly. Chanakya and Chandragupta. It's a combination
Wow.
of those two. So anywhere where there's a combination of two people of two different natures that are coming together and working, it creates powerful impact. No kingdom, no country in the world can only be purely run by administrators. You need people who are intellectuals, who are detached,
Hmm.
who are saintly, who can give
Hmm.
direction.
And Shubhaji, that they were religious experts. What religion were they following? What religious? Who were they praying? What was the religion of that time?
Yeah. So essentially, there's a word known as Sanatan Dharma. The
Huh.
word Sanatan Dharma, the word Dharma loosely we translate it, it is a word religion. But the word Dharma actually means constitutional position. Just like the Dharma of salt is to be salty. You will never find salt that is not salty. If it is not
Equanimity.
salty, it's not salt, isn't it? The Dharma of sugar is to be sweet. The dharma of chili is to be pungent, So similarly, the dharma of all of us, the Atma, is to serve God. And Sanatan Dharma, the word Sanatan means eternal. So Sanatan Dharma means the eternal duty, the constitutional duty of the Atma. That's what is called Sanatan Dharma. So it is not a religion, it's a lifestyle.
Wow.
So there was no religion as such because everyone followed a particular lifestyle that was common across the globe, and eventually it became religions basically. But that's why the word Hindu itself is a misnomer, because the word Hindu doesn't exist in any of the scriptures. It's Sanatan Dharma that was followed. So all of them followed that particular path.
So they were basically observing human behavior. It's a human conduct.
Human conduct and following the prescriptions of the Vedas.
Following the prescription of the Vedas.
Yeah,
And Vedas was all nothing but all human behavior and conduct. But total surrender
yeah,
was at that time, at those times, had Krishna come in?
yeah. Krishna. So basically, the idea of
Wow.
what Veda teaches is three things. It's MSC. All the Vedas, all the Puranas, all the Upanishads, they teach you MSC. What is MSC? Matter, spirit, and controller of both. So when you study the Vedas, when you study all the Upanishads, the Puranas, etc., you will get knowledge of these three things. Matter means anything material, you will find knowledge in the Vedas or in the Puranas, in the Upanishads somewhere. Like say, for example, Charak Samhita. Charak Samhita is a knowledge of medicine. It's matter. It's material knowledge. It's a knowledge of how you use leaves, how you use stones, how you use mud, everything for making medicines, basically. Bharadwaj Muni's Vimana Shastra. It is a knowledge of airplanes. NASA still uses Bharadwaj Muni's Vimana Shastra, which is thousands of years before, but it is study of matter, basically. So you'll find a lot of study of matter in the Vedas. So whether it is medicine, whether it is astronomy, astrology, whether it is Vastu, all of it, it's all study of matter. It's there in the scriptures. And then there is matter. S stands for spirit. There is study of spirit also, the Atma. Very detailed study of how the mind and a body are connected together from a spiritual perspective. If you study books like Yoga Vashishta, you study books like Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita, you get so much knowledge of the spirit. But the third is the controller of both. Someone who is controlling the matter and spirit. That is God. We can call him Vishnu, we can call him Ishwar, we can call him Krishna, we can call him Ram, we can call him so many names basically. So knowledge means all these three: matter, spirit, controller of both. That's the subject matter of the Vedas.
Shubhaji, this is the Treta Yug ki Vani. Yes?
Yes.
And yes. So these are the these are some of the very focused characteristics of that yuga. Shubhaji, another very interesting fact that I felt We're talking about the big M. But look at the harmony between all of them. It's not just about having the right team who advises the king correct, but the harmony amongst all of them. And they all collectively had a vision where the kingdom and the well being of the king was first. So let's talk about the harmony amongst all of them and how King Dashratha actually held them together. So you have to hold a team together also. Ji.
Absolutely. Um, One of the most important factors that is needed for anyone to achieve success in life is to think beyond themselves. Um, Only when you start thinking beyond me and mine will you be able to think of something much bigger and much greater than you. Most people in this world are stuck in the concept of me and mine. What belongs to me and anything that is mine. So anything that harms me and anything that is connected to me, it's called aham mameti. So most people are stuck in this paradigm, things centering around them. For a leader to actually do well in society, he has to expand that concept of mameti to include the whole world. The only till so most people their expansion of mameti is very limited. Aham mameti. The expansion of mameti for a person, it could be only this body. That's all that matters to me. Nothing else matters. For somebody, it could be a family, 4 5 people. I'll do anything to protect my family, that mood. And then for somebody, it could be a village. I'll do anything to protect this village. And for someone, it could be a state, and I'll do anything for the state. For someone, it could be a country. For someone, it could be all humanity. But for some people, it could be all living entities. That's what is called Vasudeva Kutumbakam. And universal brotherhood is possible unless and until you rather it's not possible until you accept universal fatherhood, right? So the idea of aham mameti expanding itself to as much as possible is the secret behind success of a leader. The role of ministers and the role of the sadhus is to help the king first get out from his paradigm of smallness, aham and mameti, and to accept a much broader world, basically. And even the king has to push his ministers in that direction. They're not just thinking from their point of view, their family and their salary and things like that. They're thinking from a much bigger point of view. So the greater the expansion, the more responsibility you accept, and the greater number of people you accept responsibility to serve, that much you are given an opportunity to serve. So for most people, they can hardly manage to serve on one family. That itself exhausts them. There are some people who are so big, so large-hearted that they can serve thousands and thousands of people, and yet not feel exhausted. So that's where the big M really comes into picture, where both Dashrath inspires the big M to think so big, the big M inspires Dashrath to think so big. And the combination of those two is what inspires a very powerful kingdom to exist and grow.
Shubhaji, there's a section in this book, and I think that start is that the beginning of Ramayana in a very real way. How ancestral blessings are passed on? Does ancestral unfinished work unfinished unfinished work, concerns, does that also get passed on? Because for King Dashratha, what happened when his sonic archery got the better of him? And it's that curse that actually led to what happened with Lord Rama. Ji Shubhaji.
So I'll explain the context of this discussion first, and then we'll discuss the particular point that you're mentioning. So, um, in Ayodhya, let me tell you the background of this particular story first. Uh, if you read the Valmiki Ramayan, there is a verse that talks about the greatness of the army of Dasharath Maharaj. And while describing the greatness of the army of Dasharath Maharaj, there is one particular verse right in between that description. There is a lot of description about how Ayodhya's army is not just brute force, but it is a very disciplined army. It talks about how soldiers are all skilled in all kinds of weapons and military arts. It talks about how the Ayodhya's army is compared to a cave which is filled with countless lions, like this. It talks about how the soldiers are ready to make all kinds of sacrifices because they loved and not feared their king. And it spoke about how the soldiers of Ayodhya were very principled people. They didn't kill anyone who was alone or helpless or fleeing. So all this it speaks about. And in the middle of this whole discussion, there's one sentence that Valmiki drops in. He says, they were all experts in sonic archery, but did not practice it. So what is sonic archery? Sonic archery is called Shabda Bedi. So essentially, it is with your eyes tied, just by hearing the sound of the movement of the object, a king can shoot, or a soldier who is expert in sonic archery can shoot at the object. That's called Shabda Bedi. And all the soldiers of Ayodhya were experts in Shabda Bedi. So one day, Dasharath Maharaj was traveling across the forest. He was on a hunting expedition, and while he was on the hunting expedition, he heard a sound of gargling. It's like a gurgling sound of someone. It seemed that a tiger was drinking water from the river. When you drink directly from the river, there's a particular sound that comes. And he heard the sound and he shot the arrow. He couldn't see. The vision was too, rather, the animal was too far away for him to see clearly. And after he shot the arrow, suddenly he heard a human cry. And the sheriff ran to that place and he saw a young boy writhing in pain with the arrow embedded in his chest. The sheriff Maharaj said, "Sorry, I thought it was a tiger." And usually, after you make a mistake, then guilt comes, isn't it? The pain of guilt is very tough to deal with. And Dashrath Maharaj, he realized his skill had destroyed him. The boy asked Dashrath Maharaj, "What is my mistake? You made a mistake of shooting that arrow, but what is my mistake?" Dashrath, he tried to explain, give an explanation, but in front of that boy whose name was Shravan Kumar, his pain and his situation, how could the Dashrath's justification be sensible? So Dashrath tried to explain, and the Shravan Kumar, he said, "Let me explain my situation." He said, "I have two old old parents who are sitting up waiting for me to get water, and both of them are blind, and I've been carrying them around all this while, and now who's going to take care of them? Who's going to get them water?" So Dasharath Maharaj kept begging forgiveness, and Shravan Kumar died. And then Dasharath took, the water to the old parents. And the moment the old parents sensed someone coming towards them, they knew it is not their son. And then Dasharath begged forgiveness, explained whatever happened, and the old parents of Shravan Kumar couldn't handle themselves. They decided to jump into the fire of their son, but while leaving, they cursed Dasharath Maharaj. They said, "Just like we are dying in separation from our son, similarly, you will also die in separation from your son." So this curse was very painful for Dasharath. first thing he came back and did is banned Sonic archery in Ayodhya. He banned Sonic archery because he didn't want another painful curse and a very painful memory to remain in somebody else's life. Making a mistake is is human, right? But repeating the mistake is what makes you, not so intelligent. Lamenting for one's mistake is very important. But far more important is to learn from one's mistake. Not making mistakes simply, um, not making a mistake is something that nobody as a human being can actually think of. We will all make mistakes, small or big, basically. To make mistake does not imply you are not intelligent or you have a lack of intelligence, but it simply implies a lack of foresight. Not repeating the mistake is a sign of intelligence. So there are two words: passion. Um, you know, Passion means excitement to do something, enthusiasm to do something, and reasoning means thinking before doing something. So it is very important to think before making a mistake. Passion makes reasoning difficult. So Dasharatha Maharaj's passion for hunting made him overconfident. Before shooting that arrow, he did not use reasoning. And now there's a consequence of that passion. So when you put passion before reasoning, there will always be some consequence waiting for you. But if you put reasoning before one's passion, the consequence will be lesser because there is a thought that has gone into the executing. So this is where we need to really learn to, before we do something that is seemingly risky, there is something known as calculated risks. Taking a risk is not a problem, but think before you take the risk, because there is always a consequence to that risk. So that's what the whole discussion is about. And of course, what the father's mistake does pass on to the son to some extent, because we are all products of um, mistakes, good things, good decisions, bad decisions, everything that our parents have made, isn't it? If our parents didn't make those set of decisions, what we are today, we would not probably be at the situation in which we are. So whether it is good or bad, it's a package deal. And responsibility of a particular incident is not only taken by one generation, but it is taken by many generations. So it's a gathered responsibility. So that's why there is a lot of emphasis given in all cultures, not only in Indian culture but in all cultures, for ancestry, in all cultures for connection with the family lineage in which you are associated, because everything gets passed on. Your mistakes get passed on, your blessings get passed on, your curses gets passed on, everything gets passed on.
Fantastic. Fantastic. There's only one word called fantastic.
Ji,
Tell me, Shubhaji, if you were running a school, now I'm looking at understanding and trying to bring it forth. Unparalleled explanation, unparalleled sharing. Tell me what's wrong with our education system that we're not getting more people like these, the youth, particularly. What's wrong with how we're growing up, grooming our youth, that they're not imbibing all this knowledge?
So education is made up of three components. Any kind of education that you think of, education is a combination of knowledge, skills, and values. So our education system currently is highly emphasizing knowledge and skills, but completely neglecting values. So as a result, we produce children, we produce youngsters who are fantastically knowledgeable, highly skilled, and a lot of money comes in. Naturally, they earn a lot. But unfortunately, because they're not equipped with values, they don't know what to do with that money. They don't know what to do with the time they have, the energy they have, the intelligence they have. And that is why we're seeing a society that is so bereft of direction and values. that it is sometimes shocking that we come across situations and cases on a daily basis that seem highly, that actually shows the discord in society. So what I feel missing is that we are creating a curriculum, we are creating systems that are highly emphasized. I'll tell you my own story. Just to give you an example, I've been working on a value education curriculum for many years now, and I personally went to almost about 60 schools across Maharashtra, trying to present the value education curriculum and trying to inspire schools to imbibe this value education curriculum in their schools. Every one of them said, fantastic curriculum, we loved it. And the moment it comes to spending a little money, which is like meager amount of money on actually that kind of value education, everyone is thinking 100 times. So the what I realized is that um, values are not valuable because it doesn't translate to an economic gain. Knowledge and skills translates into an economic gain. So therefore people say that, if I invest in knowledge and skills, I will gain this. But if I invest in values, what will I gain? What they don't understand is that they will retain what they have gained. So it's almost like focusing on one aspect of growth, but not focusing on the other aspect of growth. So we know how to grow quickly, but how to sustain that growth, how to retain that growth, and how to solidify that growth, we don't know. So I feel that's the missing link in today's education system, and the only way to fulfill that missing link is if people across India emphasize on value education as a part of education. It is not some. It's not an optional subject. It's not a free time. So most schools in India, wherever there is any sort of value education being taught, first of all, it will be taught by someone who has no other subject. It'll be a teacher who has nothing else to teach. Will teach them values. As if it is such a cheap thing, as if it is such an unimportant aspect of education. And if at all a period is kept for valid education, children consider it to be free time, and they freak out, in valid education period. So I feel that they should, leaders should start talking about valid education and emphasizing curriculums on valid education.
When should this begin? This
First
value
standard,
education? First
right from
standard.
first standard, right from first standard.
First standard onwards. How long?
First to 10th, every single year there should be some value education taught, and then in colleges it should be taught in a very different way. So first to 10th standard, the teaching has to be different, but in the higher grades, in colleges, the teaching has to be done in a very different way, but it has to be continual. Even in the higher grades, it's not that we just leave it there.
And what about homes?
Pardon?
What about homes, parents?
Of course, if any child, it takes a village to raise a child. The teachers spend few hours in school with children, but parents spend so many hours with the same children. So it has to be something that is done in a combined way.
So how do parents learn?
At least the way I am recommending is, in the schools. See, schools are centers of learning, isn't it? While the teachers are teaching us children, they also need to spend some time teaching the parents. So there's an alignment in values. So whatever is being taught to a child in school, if the same thing can be also taught to the parent through what is parent teacher association? It's not about
Yeah.
calling the parent and complaining about the child. That's not what the purpose of PTA is supposed to be. The purpose of PTA is supposed to be realignment between parents and teachers in teaching the right kind of values to the children. Basically, that's what's supposed to be happening in the PTA. So I would feel that if during the PTAs there can be some amount of time allotted for imparting certain systems of value to the parents, which are being taught to the children, then there can be some alignment in both sides.
What kind of education of this value education could be taught to the higher education? What could be there? For example, higher education.
So in higher education, like say for example engineering or science, BSc, etc., there we introduce children to three things. One, help them understand concepts of self-image. How do you look at yourself? Talk about things like authenticity. Talk about things like responsibility, etc. Second, how they relate with others. The idea of emotional intelligence, the idea of relationships, and third, how they understand the concept of leadership. So these three things should be taught in higher education in a very interesting way, obviously.
Nowhere in India is this being taught. Nowhere. Have you come across?
Few places, yes, I have come across a few schools that are trying their best to teach these things, but those schools are very minimal, and those schools are schools that are principle based schools. That means the schools are not started for commercial purposes. They started for the value education purpose basically. So when a school is started with that as the purpose for which it is begin, then those schools they do teach such values. But when the school is started, which is what most schools are, is for a certain type of commercial venture, um, the emphasis is not at all that.
And what about overseas? What about overseas? Is something like this happening?
So in the West, there is a concept known as moral education, which is if you go to, look at many of the convent schools across India today, there is moral education period. I myself have learned moral education in Moscow school. So there is certain amount of moral education being taught in many of these schools, which is commendable, which is very important, which is very very essential basically. But as I said, most schools don't have anything like that. So I feel that we need to really create a curriculum and emphasize the curriculum across.
Anything in the Ivy Leagues? Ivy Leagues, because they are the final CEOs around the world.
I have not come across anything that is being taught in the Ivy Leagues for sure. At least whatever I have gone to, so many of the schools that I have connected with, I have not come across any curriculum as such.
Why do you think this drought has happened? Why? Is it ignorance? Has it been ignorance, lack of knowledge? Or is it deliberate? What has happened?
When the emphasis is on consumerism,
Ah,
the focus is on earning more. So it all begins with consumerism and it moves towards hedonism.
yes.
Consumerism means buy, you just use things and throw things and buy more things. And the same consumerism, when it moves towards hedonism, is it's you use people and throw people. So the phenomena is same. So when we are living in a consumeristic industry, a consumeristic world, which is so heavily focused on consumerism, the natural byproduct of it is lack of values. When you live in a society which is simple living, high thinking, the society's emphasis is on self-sufficiency. The
Yes.
society's emphasis is on having little and be satisfied. These are different values that are so important according to the mindset.
Yes. Consumerism takes away, provides profits. Consumerism provides profits, whereas ethical values provide sustainability or level of satisfaction. So satisfaction doesn't bring profits because you're satisfied with sometimes with what you have.
Exactly. And satisfaction destroys consumerism. And that is why the whole propaganda is to not be satisfied.
Yes. It is the greed. It's a greed which leads to greater profits,
Correct.
not satisfaction.
Correct.
But it is not concerned the world leadership. Have you seen this as you traveled and read and researched?
Yeah, unfortunately, because um, you look at any of the biggest leaders in the world today, they are somewhere connected with corporates, isn't it? And if you're trying to favor corporates, you have to favor consumerism to the highest level, basically,
Yes.
because that's the whole ball game. That's the way the whole GDP thing works, basically. So it's not about being satisfied and being peaceful and being calm and being focused. That's not the goal. The goal is to grow and grow and grow and grow. At what cost?
Is it directly related with capitalism?
Um, yeah, I guess that. So it's a vicious cycle basically. It feeds into each other.
Because what you said today is need of the hour. Actually, people are hungry to know. But very interestingly, Shubhaji, the recent crimes which have agitated all of us, the way the women, the relationships, live in or married, where they want to marry again, and they want the woman to get out of the way, right? What is
Yeah,
it a product of? We do not know why they're doing it. We know how they've done it. We know how the crime has happened. You see, everybody's keen to know, interesting to know how did it happen, who did it, and how did it happen for matters of investigation. But when it comes to matter of spiritual psychology, nobody investigates why did it happen, what caused it inside.
yeah.
That's an area which is nobody interested, or apparently very lack of interest. What do you say?
I was invited 2 years back to speak in a conference in US on drug addiction, and these were some of the biggest police people and some of the biggest policymakers as far as drug addiction is concerned in America. And while these people, so everyone spoke about, 20 25 speakers spoke, and I was the last speaker for the day that spoke. Everyone spoke about, how the addiction is so high. Everyone spoke about the bad effects of addiction. Everyone spoke about the numbers and policies, everything. I ended with the discussion by talking about why it happens. I said one of the biggest reason why kids, young boys and girls, are getting into drug addiction is because they don't have parents who love them at home. They don't have deep relationships, and in place of those deep relationships, you fill yourself up with something else. You know, because to fill that void, basically. That's exactly what is happening as an answer to your question. Why these things are happening? Simply because we are used to this culture of use and throw, use and throw, use and throw. How many mobile phones we change in every second year? How many gadgets we change every second year? How many cars we change? How many TVs we change? How many fridges we change? We change all of this use and throw, use and throw, use and throw. We get so used to this use and throw when we marry a person. At that point, exciting. It looks all great, but after a few years, your nature has become use and throw. So then you throw the relationship and get somebody else, and then that's a relationship also not going to last for long. Just like every a product nowadays has a 3 4 years of period of lasting. Similarly, in many relationships today, that's the period where people get bored. And unfortunately, that's why I said from consumerism it turns into hedonism, and the result of that is all the crime that we see today.
Perfect. I got my answer.
Ji. Shubhaji, this basically means the balance between inner and outer work. It's also a relationship between the container and the content. But I also feel knowledge has to be experienced. If we can speak in a language that the youth can relate to, the children can relate to, keeping the real life in mind, the real life challenges in mind. I do feel it would help if we are not very rigid with certain do's and don'ts, and we kind of find a middle ground where we can speak to them, relate to them in a language they can understand. I'm sure our youth will be receptive, but yes, it does need a revolution. It needs a collective movement. It can't happen just
You will
overnight.
be extremely happy to know that I am spending hours and hours on a daily basis creating a curriculum today for from first to 10th standard for valid education, as well as from 12th 11th 12th onwards all the way till college. Basically, I'm creating a fantastic curriculum that is based on dharma, that is based on our scriptures, but can be taught in a way that is very very exciting, very according to the child pedagogy, according to the age specificness, and according to the mindset of the child's development. and in a way that it's not religious, but at the same time it is dharmic. It is very much based on our scriptures, but it teaches values that can be applicable to any religion, any caste, any community, any nationality in the world, basically. So I'm really investing in my energy in that because I realize that if we have to leave a legacy beyond us, this is what can be the legacy that we can leave for the next generation.
So why wait for the brick and mortar? Why not go digital?
Of course, happy to also consider a digital aspect. How look at a proper learning management system, etc. But we can
That's
definitely
right.
also,
So do you have in mind your digital opening? That's what demonstrative learning is all about.
sure, absolutely. We
So
can.
if we could think about value education, open it up digitally, let children register class one, class two, class three. If you have the curriculum ready, that's what demonstrative learning was started for, actually, to become a global, digital, global educating system, which is demonstrative, which
Sure,
demonstrates. So I think that's why the word was demonstrate leadership, demonstrate value education,
sure.
demonstrate the how do we acquire these qualities. I think that's why the word was chosen carefully. Demonstrate. See, our Ramayana course, our Gita is demonstrative. Our Bhatchit is demonstrative from icons. If you sort most of the programs in demonstrative learning are demonstrative learning. Demonstrate for inner growth. Inner growth. So if your
Absolutely.
curriculum is
I love
ready,
that.
if your curriculum is ready, I think we need to take a session together and see how do we benefit. We don't wait for a school which is about, let's say, 3,000. But why 3,000? If you go digital, it goes online, it goes wide, it goes through the internet. And then
Yeah.
we need languages. We need languages. We do in English, we do in Hindi, we do in other languages. Why not? If this is the need of the hour, and break the geography, it goes beyond geography, it goes beyond borders. Brick and mortar, beyond borders.
We can plan
If
it
you got
definitely.
the curriculum ready, if you got the curriculum ready, then I think we should seriously think about it. If that's a contribution make, and this requires no money, we do it for cause. You register and learn. We have no money to take. No money to take. We only need teachers. Teachers. You can have your teachers team, and we have this platform, Shubhaji. Why not? We have a
Sure.
purpose. Demonstrative learning has a higher purpose. Demonstrative learning is not a profit channel. We are all dedicating our time willingly with minimal needs being met, but maximum return. So I don't think you can look, you need to go search for an answer. You have this channel. I'm going live, I'm telling you live. We're talking about your
Sure.
book today. Roar with courage. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm roaring with courage.
We'll happily collaborate and we'll do something nice together.
So if
Definitely.
your curriculum is ready, plan it out. The team can meet, Sana and the entire team, which is behind this curtain right now. And I think that's a higher purpose. And we can design. We start it from the day you want. And we start with class one, two, three, but it needs a team together. It needs a team together. Maybe the team which may need some needs, we'll have to find the funding for it. We'll find the funding. I think funding for good causes is available today, provided they see it being genuinely, authentically delivered.
Right. Correct. Absolutely. Be happy to
So,
collaborate.
Saina, would you like to do that? Would you like to take it forward, Saina? So now that means you meet him in person. You meet Shubhaji in person. Shakira, Sivani, all of you, Sujata, you all need to, and me. We can have a in-person meeting to see how do we take it forward. Or we can do it online, starting it online. But curriculum has to be ready, and we give it a name and we launch it. Launch it on a day you choose.
Sure.
But start the day. Start with the class one, class two. Let's see the. We need the faculty. The faculty. An hour a session. Is it a daily class? It's like the Doordarshan did a thing a program. See, this is the program for Doordarshan. If you ask me, this is the program for Doordarshan. The value education. The channel could be values. I think the sanskar and asthas were all dharmic exactly for this purpose. Astha and those Asta and other channels were basically all on bringing a lot of spiritual learning together. But value education is critical, which the Brahma Kumaris do a lot. Actually, Brahma Kumaris do exactly this. Many others, Art of Living also does. So I think we can give it a, if your curriculum is ready, don't keep it with you. Decide. Demonstrative Learning Channel is as much yours as ours. It's a combined community property.
Absolutely. Sure. We'll definitely collaborate on this.
Yes.
Thank you.
जी,
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Sign up.
Shubha ji, we'll conclude our session today. जी, जो
We've had
हमारे
a webinar of a different kind today. The book plus. I think it's been a lot of plus.
जी,
Nature has its own design.
जो हमारी ऑडियंसेस हैं, अगर वो पढ़ना चाहें तो वो इसके बाद पढ़ें कि अश्वमेधा यज्ञ कैसे हुआ, और उसमें से बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिलेगा, बिकॉज इट वाज लाइक अ डबल एजेड स्वॉर्ड. इट कुड गो आइदर वेज. सो अटेंशन और अटेंशन किसी काम को देना बहुत अहमियत रखता है. निग्लेक्ट मत करिए सर्टेन एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ योर लाइफ. अपने जीवन को खूब अहमियत दीजिए, वो बहुत सीक्रेट है, उसको निग्लेक्ट मत करिए. आप अश्वमेधा यज्ञ के बारे में पढ़ेंगे तो आप उसको कोरिलेट कर पाएंगे. पढ़ के देखिए, आप सबका जीवन बहुत सीक्रेट है, उसको खूब प्यार से सींचिए. जी, शुभा जी, विल मीट यू नेक्स्ट मंथ with the third chapter.
To the chapter 3rd. Right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very
Thank you,
great.
Doctor.
जय
Thank
सिया
you.
राम, हरे कृष्ण, जय धारी. जी,
Can't thank you enough for this. Wonderful. Thank you. I do not know what snippet we will be able to pull out of this because the whole session has been a great education. So all we'll do is pack it up as one YouTube and put it in because it's gone live anyway. Let people keep revisiting it. And maybe you'll get here, they want to join you in the value education faculty. But the course is yours, the curriculum is yours. I think we need to give it a serious thought. Think
Sure.
about it. How can we? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
थैंक यू, जय धारी. जी, थैंक यू.